In June 2016, it was actually just a day or two after the Orlando massacre. I was in Ottawa for the press conference that launched the Just Society report. And Helen Kennedy, the executive director of EGAL, had invited my friend Todd Ross to speak at that press conference because the press conference was about historic injustices by the federal government against the LGBT community. And Todd spoke about his experiences in the Navy and getting kicked out. And he was very emotional, in tears. I'd never heard this story before, even though I'd known Todd at that time for at least 10 years, maybe longer. And I was totally shocked and upset, a little embarrassed that I had never known about this profound trauma that my friend had experienced. And after he stopped talking, I gave him a big hug, and I just told him how sorry I was for what had happened to him. And I was kind of puzzled that he had never said anything to me about it, never asked me. He knew I did gay rights work. He had never asked me about filing a case or anything like that. So I was really surprised. And indeed, it was actually Martine Roy, who we met at lunch afterwards, who was the one that first raised with me the idea of bringing a lawsuit for people like Todd and Martine. I felt for these people very deeply. I mean, I'm a gay man myself, but I grew up in a family where military service was very common. I'm named after an uncle who died in the Korean War. My grandfather was in the First World War. We have a lot of police officers in the family. I know how important service is to those people, that idea of serving your country. And I knew that this would be so hurtful to people in that situation. And I also related to them because they were so young when this happened to them. I mean, most people come out, in my generation, most people came out around 18, 20 years of age. And it was a very difficult process that you tried to manage very carefully, who you told first. And, you tried to stage manage the whole thing. And these people were blown out of the closet forcibly and had in the most humiliating way. And it was in circumstances where, how are you going to explain to the people back home, if you're a Todd Ross and you've been the top cadet in New Brunswick and devoted to the idea of military service, that you've washed out so quickly? Like, what happened? They were going to have to go home and confront this. And it would be very hard to avoid not telling people that the reason is because you're gay, The stories were really horrific, some of them. It's sort of, you got a pattern that people being followed by the K car and things like that. You sort of got to know what to expect, but some of them were particularly bad. I think I was shocked at how many people ended up with PTSD. I figured there would be a few, but I would say the vast majority of the hundreds of people who contacted us ended up with PTSD, which is a very crippling, chronic mental disorder. And that appalled me, that they were that badly injured. The other stories that I think troubled me the most for the women, it was the sexual assaults. It was the situations where men try to, convert them to heterosexuality by sexually assaulting them, or the times when some of them put themselves in harm's way because they didn't want anyone to suspect that they weren't interested in the man's attentions. And I think probably the worst one of those was the woman who ended up getting pregnant as a result of a sexual assault and had to give up her child. I mean, that one just ripped my heart out. I could not imagine what she had gone through. Horrible. The other ones that got to me were the people who told me about death threats, the people who were told, people in the Navy who were told that it was easy to arrange for the night watchman not to pay attention to that particular part of the ship at night, or the people in the Army who were told that there were always accidents that happened during field artillery exercises. I felt deeply ashamed of my country, that these people who had stepped up to serve their country had been treated in such a shameful way, and then had been sort of kicked to the side like so much garbage by the government afterwards. It was totally disgraceful, and I really felt strongly that something had to be done about it. I always say that people can deal with the nice Mr. Elliott or the not so nice Mr. Elliott. I have Celtic roots in Ireland and Scotland, and sometimes people get the full Braveheart from me. My Celtic ancestors believed in don't get mad, get even. That was their approach to life. My late grandmother said to me, it's not nice to fight, but if you have to fight, kick him in the seeds. And I've always followed her advice. I don't take prisoners. I'm interested in getting justice for my clients. And it depends also, of course, on the context of the case. In some cases, it's just a fight between businesses about money, and you can't get too excited about it. It's, you're just looking for some kind of compromise that makes sense for both parties. But in a case like this, you're talking about a profound wrong. I've referred to the porcupine strategy, that government needed to know, and this is going back to Stonewall, that government always needed to get the message from gays and lesbians that you could not tread on us safely, that it was, even if you won, it was going to be a very painful experience, and you were going to think twice about doing it again. And that has been the philosophy that has motivated me from the beginning, and it motivated me in this case. We went to a great deal of effort to put in an affidavit from Dr. Ord Morton, who's a historian and also a purge survivor, about the whole history of the purge, so that was documented in the court file, what had happened to these people. We made sure that there was a suitable courtroom. I asked specifically if we could use the federal courtroom in the Supreme Court of Canada building, because it's a magnificent room. The nicest federal courtroom in the country. And because it's in Ottawa, I thought it would also have special significance to our clients. Even though this could have been done by a telephone conference, perhaps, or some other kind of informal hearing, I thought it was really important to these class members that because of their background in the military and police, I thought it was important that they have the dignity of a formal hearing with all of the lawyers in their robes and the justice in her robes and the beautiful courtroom. I wanted that atmosphere for them so that they understood that the system was taking their injustice seriously, and that they were being given every dignity and every formality that the law could offer. I also told Justice St. Louis that it's normal in cases like this that they hear from class members who want to object. And I told her that the class members, there were very few of them who objected to the settlement, but there were a lot of them who supported the settlement that actually might want a chance to speak to her. That she represents the Crown in this context, as does the Department of Justice lawyer. But she is there with the coat of arms behind her. She speaks for the Queen in some ways. And I said, I think they would like to address the Queen through you. And she was very gracious, and she agreed to do it. She allowed them all to speak. She also allowed us to have Sarah Fody present, that anyone who, and normally they don't allow cameras in the courtroom, but I persuaded her this was a historic occasion, that it really should be documented. Of course, with the permission of everyone who spoke. We didn't film anyone who didn't consent. And they told their stories. And it was so powerful. It was incredible. The shattered, broken people that had the courage to stand up and speak. I'll never forget Michelle Douglas clutching the Prime Minister's apology under her arm as she stood up to speak. It was very, very moving. And after it was proved by the court, there was a sort of a moment when, because she didn't say much when she approved it, there was a moment when the class members weren't quite sure if they'd heard it right. And then she closed the court and they realized that it had been approved, and they jumped up and they were so excited and cheered, and there were tears and hugs. And Zian Pitre, who's on the LGBT Purge board fund with me and who's been like the mother hen to all of these people, she rushed over to me and we hugged, and that a picture was taken. We had Mitch Rafel taking pictures that day, and his picture of Zian and I hugging ended up on the cover of Canadian Lawyer magazine in a brilliant story about this extraordinary class action, and very powerful and wonderful moment, and one of the crowning moments in my career, to be sure. In 2013, I had a terrible year. I had a terrible year for my mental health. I had a terrible year in my professional life. And I must admit that at that point, there were moments when I really thought, okay, you've done everything that you can do. You're past your best before date. There's nothing more that you have to contribute. And you should just acknowledge that it's all over and there's nothing more to come. And this case really reinvigorated me, and it showed me that you should never count yourself out, that you should realize that there's always a contribution to be made, and you always have to be ready to answer the call of duty when it comes. When the opportunity presents itself for you to help other people, you need to be ready to take up that opportunity. And I hope someday that I'm going to be able to retire and to pass the torch to younger people on a more permanent basis. And someday God is going to retire me, even if I don't retire. But I am so pleased that I didn't give up on myself and my career, and I was still willing to take up one more brief, because this one, I thought after same-sex marriage, there was really nothing that could top that case, but I was wrong. I think although same-sex marriage is terribly important, and it will have a lasting impact on our society, now we're going to have a monument that will be in Ottawa, and long after I am dust, that monument will still be there. And whether people remember that I was part of it or not doesn't really matter to me. I'm just going to go to my reward a little more contented, knowing that our struggle has been documented and preserved permanently.